everyone, and welcome to today's CXI Masterclass. My name is Vlad Demsar. I'm a marketing academic at Swinburne University and co-director of the CXI Research Group, and I'm going to be your host for this session. So this session today is the second installment of our ongoing series of free and publicly accessible online masterclasses, which we launched late last year as part of a broader portfolio of education, research, and consulting services provided by CXI Research Group. We're going to have around 50 or so people joining us today, including a diverse range of industry professionals, including those on client and agency side, as well as a number of academic staff and students from the university and from universities both domestic and abroad. So the topic for this session will be Customer-Centric Intelligence, and our keynote speaker will be Lisa Lewers, who I'm just going to introduce to you in a moment. And the format of the session today will include a short introduction by me. I'll then hand over to Lisa for her presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions and discussion. So throughout the presentation, if you think of any questions or if you have any experiences to share, just pop them in the chat and I will then relay them to Lisa so she can share her thoughts. Before we kick off, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the land on which Swinburne's Australian campuses are located in Melbourne's East and Outer East, and pay our respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. Before I introduce our keynote speaker for this session, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes on CXI Research Group so that you all have a good idea of who we are and what we do. The Customer Experience and Insights Research Group at Swinburne University was formed around 8 years ago, and our mission is to advance knowledge and practice in the field of customer experience, at the nexus of customer insights and tech innovation. So the group is led by Associate Professor Carla Ferraro and myself, and we work quite closely with a team of scholarly researchers, industry professionals, and other people to deliver a suite of education, research, and consulting services. We have 5 broad areas of expertise, which are on the screen here for you. They include things like customer and employee experience, brand identity and health, advertising effectiveness, product and service innovation, as well as consumer and digital cultures. And most of our activities tend to fall into 3 broad buckets, and we run a number of different initiatives within each of those buckets. So the first bucket is our free and publicly available content, and that includes this seminar or webinar masterclass series. The second bucket is our education and research programs. And so within that, we have our executive education suite, and we have 3 programs coming up, one in CX, one on branding, and one on strategic planning. And in 2024, we're also going to be launching a new retail customer experience tracker, which is an ongoing market research program tracking the performance of Australia's top retailers. And the final bucket is our bespoke research and insights work, where we work quite closely with clients to help them understand, measure, and design various aspects of their CX. So if you're interested in what we do and you want to get involved, there's 3 easy ways to do that. One is to sign up to our newsletter, which contains the latest CX trends and insights, and we send that out quarterly. You can also follow our LinkedIn page, which I think now has over 11,500 followers globally, and this is where we post regular content and updates. Or if you want to chat to us directly about any of our work, you just need to drop us an email anytime and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. I'd like to now introduce to you to our keynote speaker, Lisa Lewers, who is the founder and managing partner of Lewers Research, Insights, Strategy, and Innovation. Lisa is a recognized leader in the market research and insights industry with over 30 years of experience. She holds a bachelor's degree in marketing and a master's degree in marketing science from Queensland University of Technology. She has completed executive courses at both MIT and Yale and is a qualified practicing researcher and a fellow of the Research Society. Lisa has recently been appointed as an adjunct industry fellow at Swinburne University, which is a prestigious position reserved for professionals with exceptional industry experience and status. Since founding Lewers in 2005, Lisa has seen it develop into one of the most highly regarded agencies in Australia. And the passionate team at Lewers is widely considered to be a trusted advisor and a provider of best-in-class insights, research, and strategy to some of Australia's biggest brands. Lisa's career and reputation has been built on long-term partnerships, innovative thinking and new technologies, and providing clarity to clients through meaningful and impactful insights. We're very fortunate to have Lisa joining us. Lisa, I'll hand it over to you for your presentation.
Many thanks, Vlad. So, today I wanted to talk about a topic that's a little bit of a passion of mine, and one that kind of scares me a little bit at different times over my time in the industry. And that really is the availability of really good quality research participants and how we really guard those people and treat them like the treasures that they are, because without them, we don't really have an industry and we can't really make really well-informed decisions for those marketers amongst us. So, you know, before we get started, I'd like you to really start to think about or imagine a world where people have no problem finding quality research participants. It's really easy. And in fact, people are lining up everywhere to do your studies because they're so interesting, they're so relevant, people feel very rewarded, and they also feel that what they're doing makes a difference, that there's going to be some kind of a feedback, or they're going to be able to see the changes that they've participated in providing feedback to. So this is the kind of world where the value of research is really understood, not just by people like me who are researchers, not just by people who design service experiences and not just by marketers, but also by the Australian population or any global population, and not just for government services, but also from the point of view of designing customer experiences and products and services that really meet the needs of people. It's the kind of world where we have a real understanding, a real reciprocity between research participants, researchers, and also those who fund research, all working as a collective for a collective good. It's a very romantic world. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen today, but I think it's more the exception than the rule, which is not a criticism because it's also really not an easy thing to achieve in the normal run of business in today's world. But I believe by developing really positive brand experiences, that should be the North Star for research. When we're thinking about research, we need to think about it as part of that customer experience, as an opportunity to build a brand. And if we start with that in mind and leave behind some of the textbook ways that we've typically developed, ways of interacting with respondents, then that's a great North Star for us. And it gets us really closer to that kind of nirvana that I've described, where, you know, people are really lining up at the door to do the work. And not only are they lining up at the door to do the work, they really want to engage and give you transparent and holistic insights to their feelings and their thoughts and their behaviours. So my goal today is to provide some ideas into how we might be able to achieve this. And my hope is that you leave here with a renewed focus on how we can design or think about designing research from a customer or a participant-centric lens. So before we get to Nirvana, part of what I want to do is unravel, I guess, some of the issues that we're facing today as an industry. And I guess it's pretty uniformly agreed that it's getting harder and harder to find research participants. And there's a whole range of reasons for that. I think as a broad thing, there's probably a bit of a decline in terms of willingness to volunteer and social participation. I think we're at a time where disillusionment with government and disillusion with science and research and companies is probably at some of its lower levels. And all of this is against a backdrop where we've got, you know, an increasingly complex way of life, which is challenging the ways that we've always done things in the time that we've had and the way that we communicate. Notwithstanding all of that, there's no doubt that there's an increased volume of surveys. I mean, you can't have a telephone conversation with a company without getting an NPS survey. So whether you are actively wanting to engage in research or not, you'll have ample opportunity to be doing that. And that's really a function of the fact that it used to be that we had one way in and it was a telephone on a wall, or maybe it was a letter, or even before the telephones went to the wall, they sat on a table somewhere. Now there are so many ways to reach out and contact people based on digital platforms and technology that people are being oversaturated, and there's real sort of survey fatigue, unless you are a person who's signed up to a research panel, which in itself can sometimes be problematic because we can't necessarily assume the representative of the group that we'd like to talk to. So over time, people have become less likely to respond. And against that backdrop, I think we've been increasingly hungry for data. And so it often means that as soon as you know that you're designing a survey, I can't make how many times it's a 10-minute survey becomes a 15 and a 15 becomes a 20. And really early in my career, I also remember doing 40-minute surveys. And there's a whole lot of reasons that that's a really bad idea. But increasingly, we're finding that we want to shove everything in. We want to get the most out of the person once we've got them on the line or once they've clicked the link. How much information can we get? How much bang for the research buck can we get? And we often forget about things like respondent fatigue and banks of questions that are really repetitive and those sorts of things. And we understand the science of why we might do something, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to our research participants. So it's not surprising to think, if research is concise and it's relevant and it's really easy to get to, then people are going to be more inclined to do it. And so the next point is related to that. Not only do we not necessarily serve it up in a way that's easy for them or on the channels that they're used to communicating on, we often make it very long and very boring, and the burden is on them to get through the work rather than it being something that's a bit more entertaining and relevant to their daily life. I think a really important one is also this lack of fair value exchange. And I know that there's some really good panel companies out there who are doing their best to adjust this, even from a incentive point of view. But you've really got to ask yourself if you'd be prepared to do a 20-minute survey for $6.50. There's not many people who would be very happy about that, and it makes us wonder, who are we really talking to? But fair value exchange doesn't have to just be about incentives and money. It's also, looking at things like being able to provide feedback loops, help people understand the value of the change that they're informing, and giving them reasons to want to engage even beyond some form of financial incentive. So we are wanting to do more, and we're putting more into our surveys and getting through our banks of questions all at a time, really, when shortening attention spans are a real thing. There's nothing like instant gratification. It's become a part of who we are. Life's really fast-paced, I've been in the industry long enough to know that we used to do door-to-door surveys, and, Sundays mightn't be a good idea to do it. The thought of doing that kind of thing is just highly unusual. But at those times, people were willing to sit down for an hour or two and do a face-to-face survey and be really involved. That's not really the case anymore. We've got 5 minutes with people, and it better be engaging and it better be interesting. So we're pushing against sort of a societal tide that makes it a bit more difficult. Communications habits are really changing. So, as I said, no more landlines. Everything's largely digital or mobile, and we're getting a lot better at guarding our privacy, getting through to people, getting spam dealt with, and being able to get through to them on the line is getting really, really hard, and then being able to hold them for any length of time, harder still. There's demographic issues. We're an increasingly diverse society. There's language barriers. There's different propensities and willingness to share for different cultures. How do we make that relevant? And increasingly, in a digital age, how do we make sure that we're including older demographics who aren't digital natives? How do we get in touch with those guys when we know that it's a very expensive thing to be able to get them on the phone, if we can do that at all? And then finally, with this privacy concerns, is just how good people have got at blocking people that they don't want. So there's a whole lot of reasons, and I'm sure there's more that you could add to this list, reasons why surveys and getting really good respondents is getting harder and harder. And I've got to say, there was at some point in research where I thought maybe it wouldn't matter and we didn't really need respondents anymore. I remember being terrified that big data would kill primary research. It obviously hasn't. And now we've got synthetic sample and we've got AI and all of those things. But I think we're a really long way from not having to talk to people again. And at the same time, we're at a time in history where we've got more tools to make it more interesting and more engaging than ever before, and more cost effective. So that's a bit of a doomsday story, and it's a real contrast to my research nirvana, where everybody wants to sit with you for hours and give you all of their information, ideally for free, but that would, that just doesn't happen. So why should we care? So I tend to think about participants and research participants as being the oil of the industry. Basically, the quality of the research participant is really, really critical for the sustained relevance of what we do as researchers and as marketers, because obviously researchers can't do their role particularly well, and that's going to impact on the clarity that we can deliver to decision makers in being able to do the right things for people or deliver the right kinds of products. More and more, we want to avoid professional respondents. We want to be able to fish in different ponds, so to speak. And we want real people. And when I say real, it's not always the person who is willing to sit on a research panel, and I'm not disparaging those because we use them all of the time, but the trick is to go in with your eyes wide open and make the best of what we have. We want the diversity, and very, very often in the case study I'm going to take you through today, we want to be in the moment. In an ideal world, we could walk in their shoes, sit side by side with them, and ideally be able to do that in a scalable fashion. So to my mind, it's the real basis of the quality of the work that we do, and it's one of the really big challenges facing the research industry at the moment. And the reason, therefore, that we should care, because it's a threat to what we do as a livelihood, and also the impact that flows through. Imagine a world where we made decisions without consultation with people. So we need to be opening those pathways for consultation. And I think a lot of the key to this, as I said initially, is to really think about research as part of the customer experience, as wanting it to be a brand enhancer, not something that detracts from the brand. And if those are the kind of guiding principles, and you think about it in the same way you might think about it as an advertising campaign, and really give it consideration, even in the way that you word a questionnaire and using natural language and those sorts of things, then at least we're off to a pretty good start. So what might be some of the principles that we could use to try and make the work that we do more effective in not only getting to people and getting the information that we want, but also making sure that we're getting the quality of response and the consideration that we want. It never really used to be that we had to use software to weed out people who flatlined and answered the same all the way through a survey or sped through it. People gave considered responses, and we'd like to get to that again. We want a positive and engaging experience for our participants, and that's really only possible when we start to open up and be more transparent and try to develop relationships with them. So from a marketing perspective, one of the first things that we would say is kind of know your audience, know your target. And nothing's different about that in terms of surveys. So in an ideal world, you would like to be able to really understand their propensities, their behaviours. If we want older people, what might be some of the barriers for them participating? And to that matter, younger people, what might be some of the barriers for them to be participating in research? Are there topics that we can include that they'll find interesting? Because one of the problems in research is we often want to ask about things that people aren't particularly interested in discussing or highly engaged with. So how can we work to try and align it with their interests? And that could even be in the way that we incentivise them through charity donations of things that are close to their heart. Which brings me to the next point. It's really critical that we offer a fair value exchange. And that means thinking about incentives and reasonable incentives that could be monetary rewards, it can be gift cards, it can be exclusive access to something, or it could be valuable information. But I also increasingly think there's value in thinking about what we can feed back to people about what their participation did, that thanks to them, a certain product exists or a service got changed, so that they understand the circular nature of what we do, rather than their results sort of finishing with the discussion with us and then off into the ether. I think sometimes people who are in focus groups, for example, must be quite chuffed when they see an ad that they know that they were involved in out on the television. Not everybody gets that opportunity, and particularly not when it comes to quantitative research. I think it's increasingly important that we make it easy. We have to design the process with the participant at the centre of it, rather than what's most economical for us, what's easiest, what's fastest, which are, increasing mantras that we see. Start with thinking, if it was me, what would I want? Or knowing what I do about my target or the types of people I want to talk to, what makes it easy for them? It's about trying to meet them where they are on the platforms they're using or in the way that they're used to communicating. And for some, that still might be verbally. For others, it could be through text. And increasingly, we've also got the opportunity to make our surveys engaging. We can really sort of leverage technology, which is a separate point altogether, to start to do things like show pictures or talk in words. We designed surveys initially using numbers because that's what machines needed to be able to analyse the data and give us the results we wanted. But increasingly, we don't need to do that. We've got all sorts of opportunities for analysing text and pictures and video and even voice. The next thing we need to do is, apart from making engaging, really help to build the trust around not only our industry, but the particular interaction that they're having with us. We need to be really clear about privacy. We need to be clear about disclosure. And again, these seem like really fundamentals for a lot of practitioners in the industry, but they're not always there. I've observed that personally in work recently. So we need to make sure that people feel protected, that what they say will remain private, and we need to be able to find ways to build trust. And again, these things are interlinked. So building trust is also about a fair value exchange. Building trust is not just the fair value exchange of money, but it could also be in sharing back results or showing some genuine levels of support for people as well. I've said already, leveraging technology, it's on an exponential growth curve, and there's so many great things that we can do now that we just need to start to tease ourselves to think differently about how we do survey research, and even in the language that we use. And I think part of that is also having a pragmatic lens as much as your academic rigor, because sometimes we just need to be a little less highbrow maybe in how we talk to somebody, a little clearer and simpler in the language that we use, and again, a little more respectful of time and repetition. Creating a feedback loop, I think, is really valuable. I've talked about that a lot. And one of the other things that we do, and I'm sure the panel companies do this as well, in fact, I think they do, is to ask people how these processes could be improved. If we could do it differently, what might they suggest that we could do? So there's 8 or so ideas of things that we could do. And I wanted to take you through a case study that shows how each of these has been applied in a piece of work that we did. And we did almost hit our research nirvana, where people were very excited to be doing our work. So I'll jump into that. It was a case study that we did for SEEK. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the organisation SEEK. And SEEK undertakes a whole lot of research, massive volume of research. And a lot of that often asks candidates to think about the last 12 months. So we're relying a lot of on memory, and we know that that can be problematic. So we wanted to look at ways that we could get around that and walk a little bit more with the respondents in the moment, so to speak. We wanted to see what happens for job seekers. So this was a piece of work done with people who were actively looking for a new role. And we wanted to be able to go with them along that activity, because it's not a point in time activity. It's something that takes place over quite, for some people it can be months, and for many it's at least weeks. And one of the things with that was, Seek is full of people who are obviously really mindful of candidates, but also who would have a particular job seeking journey that might be quite different to the average Australian, or someone in the trades or manufacturing, for example. One of the things that we really wanted, as I said, was that deeper understanding of not only candidates, but also competitors. So a lot of Seek's work gave a very good lens into how people interacted with Seek, but not necessarily all of the other things that people were doing along the way, and all of the different channels that they might be using. So we wanted a real-time longitudinal view that didn't rely on memory, because we know that not only do people go to multiple competitors, as I said, this is often a multi-week or sometimes multi-month engagement for people to do. The other thing that we wanted to do was to start small, which we did. We did a sort of quali-quant piece where it was very qualitative in nature in parts of it, but also fully scalable. That was really important. And we also wanted to this was very important to see, build empathy for the candidate experience. So to really be in their shoes, and also to bring it to life. So there was, to the point of different ways of communicating, there were opportunities to do your standard questions on scales. There was open-ended feedback. There was video. There were a number of different ways to address the issue that we were interested in. So in terms of the solution, we started really small. We based off a typical and comparable attrition rates. We targeted to get 100 people for 50 completes. So we thought, okay, based on what we know and what we can see, if we start with 100, we were going to go for 4 weeks. Hopefully we'll end up with 50, and that will be enough as a proof of concept to understand if our pilot would work. We also offered a pretty good incentive. So it was kind of typical, but also it was staged. So we gave people an incentive of $10 when they signed up. We gave them money along the way for the 4-week journey. So they got an extra if they finished the 4-week journey. And then we asked them if they were prepared to go to video and cut a video for us. And if they were, then we gave them an additional $10 as well to do our video. We looked at quite a number of recruitment options. So this was starting to really go off-piste in terms of what you might typically do in finding respondents. And it's, an age-old problem. We know it's a really big cost driver in research, and there's a real tension between getting quality respondents and the price that we pay for them. And often it gobbles up a lot of the budgets that we have for the work that we do. So we looked at a whole lot of different options, and it made sense, given that Seek is a digital-first business, to look to digital channels. So we chose to recruit from Facebook, and we liked that idea also because it was infinitely scalable, and we could get out to a really broad number of job seekers and a big range of people. So we engaged with Seek's digital team to develop an ad to go out to get people to participate in our research. And the other thing that we did was develop a whiteboard and explain a video for people. So again, in terms of being really clear, transparent, people understanding what they were opting into, we wanted that to be really easily understood, and in a way that people could, often if we've got a big piece of text, we skip through it. Well, this was a way of people having to sit and engage with a relatively short video, but in an entertaining way, so that they knew what was coming. The other thing about this was really recognising these respondents as people, and we also highlighted the availability of support services, because looking for a job can be a really stressful thing for people. So we wanted them to have an avenue to reach out to if anything we were asking about or anything that they came across meant that they might need some mental health support, for example. So those were the stages that we went through, and I was just going to play you our explainer video to give you a sense of what we did.
Searching for a job isn't the same as it used to be. Nowadays, there are so many places to look for a new job. The newspapers, and friends and colleagues, of course, but also dozens of websites and even social media. And then, sometimes an opportunity to switch careers comes along, out of the blue, when you weren't even planning to make a change. As one of Australia's most respected market research companies, Lewers Research is trying to understand this process from your point of view. We'd love to really understand the details of your journey so that we can help our client develop the right resources for job seekers to make it easier for everyone to find their ideal next job. To begin, we will ask some questions to help us get to know you. What kind of work you do, where you are in your career, and what type of new job you might be looking for. After that, we will send you a few short questions twice a week. We will ask you to reflect on the last few days via a survey sent to your phone. We keep it short, focused only on the things that might or might not have happened in the preceding 3 to 4 days. Things like the websites you've looked at, or the number of interviews you've had. There are no right or wrong answers, and your responses are entirely confidential. We will send you a text each Wednesday and Sunday with a link to answer the questions right from your phone. It's fast, simple, and fun, and will only take a couple of minutes to complete. You can do it anywhere. At the end of 4 weeks, we'll send you a $50 gift voucher from GiftPay, which lets you choose from hundreds of gift cards, experiences, or charity donations. Plus, you'll receive another $10 if you record a short video about your experience. It's super easy. We've set up a webpage with frequently asked questions where you can learn more. Searching for a job isn't the same as it used
to be. Excuse me. So it was very, very clear to people what was going to happen, and we made that seamless. They were able to basically click on an ad in Facebook and go straight through to that video and to understand what would happen, and then from that video to go straight back into the beginning of the survey. What you can see scrolling on your screen here is a bit of an idea of the interaction. So it was a survey link, but we made it look like a chat, and the chat was also responsive to what people had said. So, for example, if we were checking in with somebody and they said, "Oh, I had an interview," it would say, "Congratulations, that's fantastic," and then go on to the next. So we tried to make it a bit more personable, recognise their own achievements, and also condolences on some of the challenges that they might have had. So we were doing check-ins outwardly to people. And though, as it said, it was brief, it was to the point, it wasn't onerous. So I sort of coined this term, it's like bonsai research. We're building up bits of information over time rather than asking people to sit down and do one great big lump that relies on memory. It was meant as a non-burdenous, if that's a word, way of checking in and getting the information that we wanted. But people were also able to proactively contact and engage with the bot if there was something that they wanted to be able to say or feedback to us as well. In terms of the delivery, we set this up with a live dashboard so the client could watch it. It was relatively simple, but it also, because we were using open-ended, we could look at sentiment and how sentiment changed based on whether people had interviews or callbacks or whether they'd been rejected. We also wanted to keep it really interesting because we didn't want to just put the same survey out there twice a week. So we changed the wording around. We'd have different hot topics, I guess, for people to be able to give feedback on. So it wasn't exactly the same thing every time they got the survey. So in terms of how it worked, we were really happy with it, which is we treated it as a good learning experience. We had a great client who was really interested in learning, and so it was a very open and communicative process. we had set aside a reasonable ad budget, particularly for something like Facebook. And in the end, we only spent 5% of that budget. So, at the beginning of this presentation, I said it can be difficult to find respondents. We had allowed for, this slow ramp up to get to our 100 that we wanted to start with. We had to stop recruiting in 2 hours because we had such a strong subscription rate. And in the end, our cost per recruit turned out to be $2.37, which is substantially different from if we had done it in a traditional way to be able to find people to do our work. And admittedly, it's qualitative, so we could be a little more pick and choose, and it was something that we were doing as a learning process. Having said that, we were really happy in terms of the quality of the people that we got. And it meant that we were oversubscribed, but the money that we would have spent on advertising, we spent on the extra incentives. So in terms of how that research actually worked, 37% of those who clicked on our ad on Facebook joined the study, and many more were screened out. It really highlighted Facebook. Again, with all of these things, you need to go in eyes wide open and be mindful of the kind of target that you want and the information that you need. But for our purposes, Facebook was appropriate and we could use it, and it helped to understand the feasibility of doing that. In the end, instead of 100 participants, we had 183 participants, and only 5% of our advertising budget, as I said, was spent. So we were able to compensate these people and still give them the incentives because we'd saved the money, which from a research perspective was great. We're talking to twice as many people pretty much for the same money. We found that the respondents that we got were really, really generous, not with their time and also in the richness of the responses. And I'll show you a vox pop at the end of this, but I think in terms of diversity, it was some of the best vox pops I think I've ever seen. Really expansive, lengthy and articulate in the types of responses that we got. We had really low dropout rates. 85% of people continued all the way through to the end of the 4-week period, and also really high engagement. So on average, we had 6 to 8 check-ins. 6 of the 8 check-ins were completed each week. So people were coming along on the journey with us. And then of the participants who responded to the SMS, so in terms of responsiveness, most of them did that within, 22% within 5 minutes, and half of them within an hour, and most of them within 24 hours. So they were on the ball and engaged. We weren't having to send out reminders for people to do the work or to engage with us. And then finally, of the 183, as I said, we lost 15% of them, so we still had quite a few. And that meant we had quite a pool for our vox pop videos, and 1/3 of people went on to record a vox pop for us. So I think we ended up with roughly 50 or just over 50 vox pop videos. So as a way of engaging with people and keeping them along on the journey, the process seemed to work. Admittedly, we were lucky in that we were talking to people about things that are really interesting to them, things that they were involved in. But the experiment actually went a little bit better than we thought it would. It's something that we think you could use, for big life-changing events like buying a new home that goes over a period of time. But also we've used this really successfully for small habitual things like snacking and those sorts of things that people do almost mindlessly to capture them in the moment. The other thing that we did was promise people feedback. And so we sent everyone who participated was sent some feedback and let know the results of the study. So I think there's a little bit of voyeur in people, or they like to know something other people don't know. And so they responded very well to this as well. And you can see there that we also had charity call-out lines for Beyond Blue and Lifeline for support. So in terms of the kind of feedback that we got, It really was positive. These are verbatim some of the things that people said pretty much unprompted. A great opportunity to share my experience, easy to take part, easy to follow. So remember, as part of this, we asked people to leave some feedback for us on how they found the experience and any suggestions that they might have for us to be improving that experience. It was great. It kept me on track with my job hunting and made me more accountable. And thank you for letting me take part. And when we presented this at one of the Research Society conferences, the client from SEEK said, well, when was the last time someone thanked you for letting them take a survey? So we came up with this idea, and I guess it was the seed for the presentation today, that research can also be a service. It doesn't have to be all one way. It doesn't have to be just about getting data outward. It can also be supportive. The experience really delivered something that beyond a value of what we were expecting. From the client's point of view, they felt that it played a role in helping to humanise the brand and demonstrate that they really understood the target. Many felt someone was on the journey with them, supporting them as they were applying for a job. And it's interesting, and a lot of research has shown this, people knew they were talking to what was essentially a robot, but they still felt very supported, as if it was a person that was there with them. So our outtake from that was that there really are opportunities to deliver research experiences that are mutually beneficial. And we have to sort of try to think about, beyond typical financial incentives, what are other ways that we can engage and make people want to be a part of the process. So I won't play that one, I'll skip over. So in terms of that piece of work, that video that I skipped was just someone saying a thank you, but I think I got that point across. If we go back to that list that I said before, there's 8 things. Know your target. I was lucky. We were lucky. We had a client who really intimately understood their target, and we were engaging with the target in something that was very important to them. Offer a fair value exchange. We did that in terms of sequenced and very reasonable incentives, as well as giving the feedback on the results. We made it really easy. The ad popped up in a platform they were on anyway. They didn't have to go looking. They clicked on it, they saw the video, they decided if they wanted to do it, and then they signed up. We made it engaging. It was in that chat kind of a format. They could talk, they could text, they could do ratings. By having the video, by having the staged incentives, we helped to build that trust. Also by offering support of Beyond Blue and Lifeline, I think it showed that we were real and considering them. And of course, we did all of the usual things in terms of ensuring privacy. We leveraged technology, that's pretty clear. We had that feedback loop with them, and even to the point that we were monitoring to see if there were people that did need, for example, mental health support. We did have one. And we invited the opportunity to give us feedback to continually improve. So in case you haven't already gathered, my main point is that a survey is a brand experience. It's not just a questionnaire or something to fill in. And I posted recently an example of mine. I had a smashing sales experience that was highly involved. The guys were fantastic. And, at the end of it all, they said to me, oh, you can expect to get a survey. And, it'd be really helpful if you could fill it in. I'm used to people saying it's really helpful if you give us a good score. I thought, fair enough. I said, yeah, I know about those surveys. Don't worry, guys, I'll give you a good response. And so the survey came to me and I went to do it. I was actually looking forward to giving them really good feedback. But I didn't recognise the name of the person on the survey. So I thought, oh, maybe something's gone wrong in the scripting or the routing. So I sent a screenshot to the fellow that I dealt with and I said, look, I think there's a mistake here. I'm not sure who this person is. And he came straight back to me. He said, that's okay. We're just trying to get the scores up for a colleague of ours. Go ahead and fill it in. And I didn't. How can I provide a rating to somebody I don't even know? And so I went from feeling really, really good about the brand and about the experience I had to feeling just a kind of little bit tarnished from that. So it just really highlights the importance of the detail and thinking through what we're doing and what we want these touch points to say about who we are and how we think about our brand. So just to wrap up, I know we're pretty much out of time. I guess I've said that thinking of research and as a brand experience being the North Star, and there's 8 points of things that we can do, and I've demonstrated those through the case study, and I'm sure that there's more, and I'm sure that all of those 8 don't go with every single study you could ever do. It's more about trying to challenge the way we traditionally do things to be more engaging. And so in terms of how we can do that, I think most importantly, make it as relevant as you can. And that means knowing your target as best you can. And be respectful, be responsive, make sure that what we've got is talking to them at a time that suits them, talking to them on a platform or a channel that they're used to, engaging in a way that they might be used to, get them to use pictures, gamify the survey experience, make it a bit more fun and enjoyable and not quite so serious and difficult. Respectful is really closely related to the last point around, being rewarding in terms of a really fair value exchange, not just monetary value exchange, but feedback loops and thank yous and follow-ups. And respectful obviously also really relates to that, making sure that we protect people's privacy more and more. To the extent we don't do that, we will run out of quality participants. So all of this is to say, let's engage and continuously improve and challenge the tradition of how we might do things. And it means that we need to cooperate as an ecosystem as well. Not only participants, but researchers, clients and marketers need to be willing to try something a little bit different to be able to advance the science of what we do. Now I'll hand back to Vlad and see if there are any questions, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Lisa. That was a fantastic presentation. I'm just going to share my screen again. In particular, it was great to see you take us through that detailed example of how research can be sort of embedded into the customer experience and help us to improve the quality of the data, but also add value to those who are participating and really enhance their customer experience as a result of that process. There's no questions at the moment in the main chat, so if you have a question, just pop it in there. I have had a couple of people just private message me with a couple of questions, so let's go through those first, and then we'll see if anything else pops up in the chat. So the first question I've got here is, how would these principles apply to a larger scale quantitative research project?
I think it's a really good question. I was lucky in that this was small scale, but we were thinking of ways that we could blow it up. But I think there's some fundamental principles there in terms of meeting them on the terms, making sure that it's engaging, using different ways of asking questions, avoiding banks of questions, making sure that we're rewarding them as well that we can. So often we're engaging with panels, we know that there's a sort of basic incentive in place there, but offering opportunities to be able to feedback results even to people. I think that's really important. So, and one of my pet things is even simplifying the language of questionnaires. We often write it like we might learn it at uni or without really thinking about the person that we're writing to. So make it conversational, make it interesting. And sometimes even on some of the surveys we do, give them the opportunity to opt out if they've had enough. So often if we know we're in a time-poor audience, we'll stack it. Here's, if you've got 5 minutes, and if the first 5 minutes is fun enough, maybe they'll go on to do the next 5 minutes. So there are a number of ways to come at that.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. I've got a second question here, and then I've got a question in the main chat. So I'll just go to this second private message here. So that's an interesting question. Is it always possible to implement this approach? And what if the category just isn't that interesting? And how can we sort of compensate for this?
Yeah, it's a good one, because there's so many times we're talking to people about things they're just not interested in. And I think Context is king in so many things that we do, and we use a lot of preamble for things that maybe aren't interesting or because we feel like we should say it. I don't think sometimes it hurts. You know, people aren't stupid and they generally don't lie. So it can be quite useful to even set up at the beginning of why we're doing something or what it might inform, or if you can't do that from a bias point of view, do it down in the back end. And the other thing, of course, is to not make, I think there's this, if it's something I love doing, I'll go through maybe the most boring survey. If it's something that I'm not very engaged in, then there's even a greater challenge on us to let them, talk in pictures or do video responses or do voice responses. Don't give them, banks and banks of tick the box kinds of questions. Change it up a bit or pepper in some things that might be interesting. Sometimes it's worth spending a question or two just to change it up, make it different and get people engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. And having to work, particularly for those categories where it's not as interesting, having to work just that little bit harder to try and make it more engaging for people. Absolutely. I've got a question in the main chat here from Angela, who's from Yarra Valley Water. Was there any advice on how to make brand trackers more engaging?
Those can be a challenging one. I think the first one, one of the biggest problems is with brand trackers is we want to put everything in it. So it ends up being, the Bible for an organisation. So the first thing is keep it brief. And if you can't, then modulise it and think of creative ways that everybody's not sitting through a lengthy questionnaire. And I think the other thing is, particularly if you're somewhere like Yarra Valley Water, thinking about community issues that might be interesting, letting people, so an idea might be letting people have their say. So the very first question might be just open-ended or anything you want to tell us, and you might want to do it, but that could be a public viewing thing, or it could be something that you feed back to the community. Whenever it's a public service like that, there's a real opportunity in terms of community feedback to show them what you're doing with the work. And again, changing up the way that you ask the questions and gamifying it as much as possible, whether that's in a Tinder back and forth or, again, pick a picture that makes you think of Yarra Valley Water, why, different ways of doing it. And sometimes we're so focused on continuity, and I understand things going to KPIs. Keep that stuff constant at the front so you can play around, business up the front, fun down the back, play around down the back to make that interesting and engaging for people.
Yeah, and even simple things like what we've been discussing recently in some of our work, changing from, 11-point or 7-point or 5-point scales just to simply click the brands that are associated with this particular attribute.
100%. Because, we think everybody thinks in a 10-point scale. Well, they don't really. And the reality is most often they use maybe 3 big chunks of that scale, but the cognitive load's massive to be able to think like that. So, you either associate a brand with something or you don't. Do we always need to know the degree? We do that because we want to model everything. But now, again, with technology and advances in analytics, we don't need everything to be on scale measurement.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're almost out of time, so I might just wrap up the session. Really just wanted to close today this second installment of our CXI Masterclass series, and we're going to be announcing our next Masterclass date and topic in the next few weeks, so please stay tuned for that. I'd like to say a massive thank you again to Lisa and her team for putting together the amazing keynote presentation that we had in this session. And thank you all for joining us. Hopefully we've managed to sort of inspire you and give you some fresh ideas related to both how to do your research and how to embed this within the customer experience. And we look forward to seeing you all at the next CXI Masterclass. Bye for now.